Hey guys, so I'm here and today I will be going through my guide for the Monsters Starter deck. This guide is obviously geared towards new players and we're looking at the deck now. It's a pretty basic deck. It's very reactive. Effectively, the idea of this deck is to play reactively, waiting for the opponent to commit to a row a little bit before using Wild Hunt Hounds and possibly Nethril to secure a lot of value over time. And you've got some high power golds, some kind of high power bronzes, navigators to pull out your dudes, and Aridin to typically pull out a navigator, although sometimes he can end up pulling out a hound or something a little different. This deck is pretty solid and doesn't necessarily need changes like some of the other decks, although I will actually be taking out Doo-Doo for a Thunderbolt Potion, because Doo-Doo is pretty unreliable and he kind of clashes with what Scorch is meant to do here. So anyway, let's get into some games. Okay, so we have our first game here, and we're going to be against the Skellige, presumably also a started deck. So we're going to be against the Skellige started deck here. The Skellige started deck is one that effectively generates its power by buffing up a single bronze unit in such a way that they can resurrect it and keep carrying over that big one single target buff over the rounds. I'm looking for Scorch here, because Scorch is a great way to deal with those single target effects. Don't have it. So we've already got some gold cards, Royal Decree to pull out either Triss Marigold or Imlerth, as we can see here. Wild Hunt Riders are generally decently valuable, although we generally want to look for proactive plays here. The consideration is whether Alzur's Thunder will have much value in this matchup, and we don't think it really will. So we'll kick Alzur's Thunder, we'll kick a Wild Hunt Warrior because it's a target to pull with Navigator, and we want proactive plays, and we'll kick the Archgriffin because the only weather that started deck plays is Rain, which isn't necessarily effective. The Archgriffin is basically here for the mirror match to counter Frost that your opponent might be casting on you in that mirror. So we lost the Quinn Flip, which is pretty unfortunate for this deck because it is a very reactive deck. We'll open with playing Ice Giant first. We hope he doesn't use Triss or Thunder on anything, because then we just get put in the same exact position. And we want to be able to play from a reactive stance. So right off, if we do want to force out the round, we can use Aridin on a Hound. Incidentally, we didn't actually see it, but the most important thing about this mulligan is to get rid of any Biting Frosts, this card here, in your hand, because you pull them out of your deck with Wild Hunt Hound. You don't want to play them from hand. Okay, so we'll just do that. I mean, he's Skellige, so he generally stacks both the melee and the siege row. In the first round, typically more so the melee row. So we'll play a Hound here. We would put it on the siege row if we can, because we kind of want a row stack, but we don't really have the option to right now. So huge tempo play. He's forced to basically try to keep up with us here. And he can kill the Hound, but he has nothing in his graveyard to buff, so there's kind of no reason to in terms of like the value he's getting. So the Hound is dead, and of course the Navigator can't pull it out, which is a large amount of value that he's getting in terms of denial. Normally we could consider casting Nethril, or playing Nethril here to increase the value of our Frost, but of course we don't have it. And another thing you'll note is that we have Royal Decree and the rest of our golds. Looks a little awkward, and it's not really a big deal. The problem is, of course, Royal Decree pulls out a gold card from your deck, and I don't have any gold cards to pull out from your deck, so this card literally can't do anything. But I'll always be able to find value with it in the later rounds, when I can send one of them back. This situation can be very, very awkward in round 3, but it happening in an early round isn't so bad. So here, we'll just play Triss Marigold. We're hitting this one, obviously, because this one is in Frost. We don't really have a lot of proactive plays, and we kind of want to force him out of the round. Sure, it doesn't get its Brave status here or anything. It's very unfortunate. This deck, what this deck really, really lacks is just a couple proactive bronzes. And what I mean by that is that Ice Giant is decently proactive. You can play it early on. But everything else in your deck is reactive. Like Chort can be proactive if your opponent... I think I might end up passing here. It's very hard for him to beat me in a single card, given that he's losing 4 value to Frost over 2 turns. So, Chort is very proactive in a certain sense, but only when you're behind by enough points. He's losing 6 more then. This Frost is kind of destroying him. Is that gonna be enough? That is not enough. Yeah. He's misplaying pretty badly into this Frost. He's going several cards down, and he doesn't even end up winning. Yeah. So, pretty bad misplays by him. He didn't account for how deadly the Frost would be, and he probably overestimated the damage, or overestimated the damage potential of his Warcrier. So obviously at this point we will be shuffling one of these golds back into the deck, doesn't matter which one, just to get value out of our Royal Decree. And we've got two Navigators. Our two Navigators are a little bit unfortunate here because their only target is a Warrior, of which I only have one in my deck. So one of the Navigators will pull out my last Warrior, and the other one won't really do anything. We might end up insta-passing here. As I said, this deck is very reactive, and you really like being able to play from behind. There's kind of no play I can do here on round 2, so I'll just pass. I'll let him put a card into me, and then on round 3 he'll be playing first since he won this, and then I can just kind of react to what he's doing. This is what you'll do a lot of the time with this started deck, just because you have no proactive plays, so it can be very difficult playing deep into a round that you have to go first in. That's fine. Like, he sacrificed the Freya there to basically make his Skirmishers a little bigger. The Skirmishers is a card that basically gets bigger every time it goes back to the graveyard. So, it's bigger now, and he can res it this round, and it'll be even bigger. But I'm okay with that, because I have Scorch, I've got Geralt, etc. So, one of these Navigators is probably going to have to go here, as I mentioned before. It's pretty awkward. And what's even more super awkward is we got our Imlerith back. So, very bad RNG to that end. We ended up with a dead card here, which is Royal Decree, but it's fine. We're still in a position to win this game. We've got our Navigator to pull out this last, Warrior, to target the Warrior, unless he kills it, which would be a little unfortunate, but it should get boosted, so it should be a 7. We've got the Chort, which again is good when you're playing reactively. We will be playing from behind. We will be looking to get that Chort value. Now, you'll note that the Brave tag basically means when you're playing from behind, as you can see in that little pop-up, and that is calculated after the Chort's value is on the board. So if I play Chort right now, we'll be tied, and it won't get the Brave trigger off. So I need him to be more than 6 points ahead of me to be able to play Chort and get the Brave value, and right now he's only 6 points ahead of me. So I'll play Ice Giant here. It's a pretty slow play. I don't actually have any source of Frost, so the Ice Giant is kind of doomed to be a 5, and that's okay. Perfect. So he grants my wish and allows me to play the Chort for value. There's kind of one consideration, which is playing Geralt instead. The Chort's boost is by 4, Geralt's boost is by 3. I think playing Geralt is a little bit better at first. But both of them have Brave tags, so both of them we want to be able to play when we're behind like that. Geralt is a bit of a better earlier play, specifically because he... oh, and there's something you can see, by the way. A little tip for you. When you saw that Royal Decree pull up, when he played it from his hand, you could see he could only select one unit. Of course, we knew that because he just played 2 golds, and a Royal Decree is his 3rd gold, so he pulled the 4th from his deck. But in many situations in round 1, looking at the amount of units he can choose, or cards he can choose from with Royal Decree, tells you exactly how many golds he has in his hand. A very useful tip. And of course, he plays Geralt, lower value than mine, and we're going to be playing our Chort at this time. We play our Chort in the melee area because that's the row we're stacking the most out of. We want to row stack because we have Commander Sorin. Commander Sorin boosts a bunch of units on the same row, and right now we've got Chort, which is agile, Archgriffin, which is agile, and one on melee and one on siege. The thing is, though, that the Navigator is going to pull in additional units to melee, so we kind of have 2 committed units to melee, so we want to effectively stack the melee row. And of course, if he rains it, we have the Archgriffin to clear it. So the best play here is probably Imlerith. Imlerith is fine in this position. It gets this down to 3 health so that the Wild Hunt Warrior can ping it down and ends up getting the boost off of that.
Should I pound it into a poker?
That's fine as well. Not really a problem. So we'll play the Warrior, making sure to play it adjacent to the Chort, and we'll hit this. It is true that he denied us the potential to get the boost off, but unless he plays another one, we'll still get the 2nd boost off the 2nd Warrior that we pull with this Navigator.
We'll follow you always.
So he buffs it to 3 strength, which doesn't affect me at all, because I'm just going to kill it regardless. So the Navigator pulls the Warrior. Again, we make sure to place them adjacent to each other. Don't put it on the right side of Imlerith or the left side of Geralt, because we just want to enable our options for our own Commander Sorin to work very well. Okay, that's fine. And we can I guess we would Scorch that at this opportunity. He gave us a very good opener for scorching both of his units. Before the Crouching Crate comes out to block that, the Crouching Crate will be pulling his... it wouldn't block it, I don't think, but there's no reason to save the Scorch either. So, the game is over. Our point difference, as you can see, is 27 to 45, and he doesn't have any way to make that up here.
Looky here.
I'll just pass here. So that's one game with this deck. We didn't actually get much of our Frost combo, and we weren't able to showcase it that much, but ultimately you can still see the kind of very reactive controlling aspects of the deck. Okay, we find ourselves in a second game here. This guy's a card sharp, and he's got that tag. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that means he was a closed beta player. So, as we see here, we have the situation I was talking about before. We want to get rid of these Biting Frosts, because we always want to be able to play them from our Wild Hunt Hounds, which we can, even if we don't draw both of them, pull one of them with a Navigator, or if we draw neither of them, play one of them with our leader, Power Eridan. So, regardless, we want both of these Frosts out of our hand. But ultimately, do we want to kick one at first? And the answer is probably not. We're looking to reduce our reactive options and decrease our ability to draw things. There's no blacklist to be found with these warriors though, so we'll open with kicking up Frost. There's no blacklist with any of these. Blacklist basically means we keep the Thunder for sure in this matchup. And we keep the Cleaver too, that's a very good draw. The Warrior is decent. It offers us control potential. Basically what Blacklist means is it's a mechanic during Mulligan wherein when you discard or mulligan one of your cards, you can no longer find any copies of that card for the rest of the mulligan. So basically you look for bronzes that you don't want in that matchup, that you have other copies of those same bronzes left in your deck, and you get those out of your hand first, so that you can no longer find them again for the rest of the mulligan, which increases your draw potential there. So he plays the Geralt very aggressively. He's not really gaining too much value out of that, but unfortunately, as I said, our deck really struggles to find proactive actions, and this is the biggest problem with this deck. We're going to mirror his action, which is a play that we really don't want to have to do, because we're just playing him as a 10 and kind of early as well, but it's fine. Basically, this deck would be a lot better if it just had a couple of bronze cards that were big and meaty and less about damaging or affecting the opponent's board. That's really unfortunate. He's not giving us an option to really do anything here. This is a very tricky situation. We've got the Royal Decree pulling both damaging golds in our deck and nothing to actually damage with them. We've got a lot of buffs, we've got a lot of removal, and he's just playing gold things that we can't interact with. We're probably going to have to play Eridan here, and we're probably going to have to pick something other than a Hound, which kind of sucks. Although actually we could pick a Hound and put it on the melee row, because the Square Tail deck stacks the melee row really hard. I honestly think that's fine. We know the composition of his deck, unless he, opens packs and changed things. We know that the Squirtel deck is basically all about running melee row dwarfs and getting value that way. So you run Mahakam Defenders, and they have large carryover value, and you want to kill them or prevent their effects from going off. Which is why I was saying that Alzur's Thunder and Cleaver are very good to have, because Thunder kills them, and Cleaver prevents their effect from going off, so they don't stay throughout the round. And again, another unfortunate position. I'm just going to rally here, see what I pull. He's not giving me room to do anything. That's okay. It's not terrible. It's a 5-point play. It's kind of terrible. He's putting me in an extremely awkward position. Wow. Yeah, and this is kind of the nightmare scenario of this deck. He's not giving me anything to target, and this deck really fails when it doesn't have anything to target. I mean, I have to extend this round. It's kind of my only win condition. I will be Royal Decreeing here, and I'll just pull Imlerith with no target. I have an incredibly awkward hand. And it's not even just my hand. This deck has a hard time dealing with situations like this. It's very powerful when the opponent plays cards that allow them to be controlled, and a little awkward if they're playing like this. He's playing very intelligently. Much more so than you would expect the players at this level, i.e. new players, to play. He's playing Saskia. Yeah, he's playing just as awkwardly. He knows he can make me play more awkwardly than I can make him. We might have to just Cleaver here. It's also possible Wild Hunt Warrior is the play. We'll just play a Warrior, honestly.
Comes for you.
So, Saskia is a card that boosts itself proportionate to the number of things later. Huh, okay. We'll just play Cleaver. That's fine. We're basically looking to stay ahead of him here. We should be able to force him out of this round. If he passes, if he doesn't pass, if he keeps going, we will be using Thunderbolt Potion for 8 value here. It's only buffing 2 units, but it's still 8 value, and it's in a way that's not vulnerable to a Scorch, which he doesn't have another Scorch, but it's still good practice to follow in general. He opened up our line to Scorch as well, and we might actually end up taking it. The problem right now with Scorch is that we don't get ahead of his score. If we don't get ahead of his score, he absolutely will pass. It'll put us to 38, he'll pass, he'll force a second card down out of us, and that'll be really, really terrible. So, I'm basically forced to use this Thunderbolt Potion. He's decoying the doo-doo. Unfortunately for him, the decoy and the doo-doo is a very awkward combo, because specifically the way decoy and doo-doo works, decoy increases a card's base strength and then plays it again, but doo-doo resets its power to that of an enemy unit. So it, unlike basically any other unit in the game, can't actually make use out of the 3 strength from decoy. Yeah, he's going in there. Great. So we have the ability to Scorch here, and he's losing a little bit of value to that guard. So we'll Scorch the, not the ability to Scorch, because we have our unit to be Scorched, but we will end up zapping the doo-doo and force that out. There was actually a consideration for zapping the Mahakam guard. Okay, he gives it to us, great. So we were able to win the round, 1 card down. Very, very awkward round, although again, kind of silver lining of that situation is he's playing very awkward to generate an awkward scenario for us. And of course, it was the right play on his part, and our awkward scenario was worse than his, but it's still not as bad that, you know, he actually did have to sacrifice something to play like that. We will probably be getting rid of the Archgriffin here. We kind of need the Scorch as a win condition, I think. And we're going to be passing immediately again. He'll play a Mahakam Defender here, presumably, which is a 5 strength unit that carries over its value into next round. This is it. So he'll start next round with a 5 strength dude, but that's okay, because I have Chort and Scorch to catch up if his hand is specific. It might be hard for me to win this, but at the same time, I do have the Biting Frost coming through with this Hound, a very powerful card. If I end up top decking something strong like Triss, that's good. So the question becomes, what do I kick here? Is kicking Scorch worth it? The question is, how reliably can I get a Scorch? I mean, I've got my Chort, which is, yeah, I can get a Scorch pretty reliably, I think. He has to play a guard or something. Nithrall. Nithrall is a great draw if he can't clear me. Oh, he just used it.
They can hide, but never
And he
step
whiffed his
aside.
archer. So the consideration here is Scorch. I could Scorch to kill both of his units. That being said, the problem with the Scorch is that one of his units is effectively already dead, because it's a Mahakam Defender on the melee row. That being said, there's a really... So the question is he ever going to play anything bigger than a 5? And if so, I should save Scorch for that. I think it's risky. I'm honestly just going to Scorch now. If I wait to Scorch, I might end up blocking myself out of the opportunity to, because I have my own 5 and my own Chort, which I want to go to a 10, and they might block me out of it. Sometimes when you're in a round 3 scenario, you have to Scorch early like that, just to ensure that you're getting at least some value out of it, even if his Mahakam Defender in that scenario was already going to die to the Frost invariably. So I was basically conceding to get 5 points out of that Scorch by killing the one unit that wasn't already going to die. Anyway, a pretty good example of this deck's power, and the fact that, yes, yes, while it's possible that the opponent can force you to play awkwardly given your very reactive playstyle, you still have a very strong core that can carry you through your kind of starter deck experience. Okay, so here we've got our third and final match against Northern Realms. Northern Realms is a faction that, well, their starter deck has a lot to do with armor and basically peeling off that armor and reapplying it to gain various effects. It has interesting interactions with our very control-natured archetype with these weathers and with these things like damages. So we'll see how that plays out. We've got a pretty solid hand, a Hound to pull out Frost, a Navigator to pull out the second Hound, an Ice Giant as a proactive play, which this deck so desperately needs, and we've got First Light and Alcer's Thunder. So here, the Alcer's Thunder is actually a decent choice against one of his cards, which is the Redanian Knight Elect. We're actually going to go ahead and kick the First Light here. We don't necessarily need that card. Not sure what the best play is. We do want to keep the Thunderbolt Push and the Commander Thorn because they're best used here. We can get rid of the Cleaver. I don't think it's going to be that useful in this matchup. We don't mind the second Hounds at all, so we'll just get out of this hand now. It's important when you've got a lot of cards that you don't want in your hand at all in your deck to not take the third mulligan unnecessarily. Right now, we've got 2 Biting Frost. We have not blacklisted these, so we had the potential to draw them. And if we draw them, then we can't pull them with Hounds, because Hounds pull them from our deck. And additionally, we've got other Wild Hunt things. For example, if I find the Warrior, then my Navigator is useless. If I find another Navigator, that can be a bit awkward too. So we're going to open with our Ice Giant. Again, our proactive play as always. We can't pass round 1 like we do round 2, because winning round 1 is too important. And he's doing the same obnoxious thing that the last player did. That really hurts our potential. And in his case, a lot of his cards are agile, so it's a lot harder to try to lock down one of his rows like we did last time. We're just going to play our Wild Hunt Warrior here. This could be very vulnerable to a pass, but I doubt he would pass without playing Fultist.
Onward! Attack!
So, again, he's giving us nothing here. We will be using our Navigator to pull out this Warrior. The first changes you should make to this deck, by the way, as, you know, you might notice, the first changes you should make to this deck are basically about putting proactive cards in it. You don't have to craft anything. I wouldn't necessarily recommend crafting like rares, but if you get any bronzes from kegs that can go in this deck that are just units with like 6+ points that you can just play on turn 1, you just want to be able to play some units on turn 1. That's the problem that this deck has right now. So he is playing the Tridem Infantryman, and it's buffed by the full test. He buffs all of his units in his hand and deck by 1, so it's a 9. The problem is that we would very much like to start hounding and taking off his armor, but if we hound right now and put it on the melee row, his armor will actually block the frost and our score will be tied, giving him a pretty good opportunity to pass. So it's very vulnerable to that. Honestly, I kind of doubt he'll take the opportunity to pass in this case. I feel like this is a safe play. I completely forgot. That was a... Sorry, I had a complete brain fart. So we always had the Ice Giant go buffing itself when the frost was applied, so we weren't vulnerable to it at all. That was just my bad.
You'll suffer the consequences of your
Philippa, he
foolishness.
plays. He should play it... Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So we killed a few of our units. This is one of the strongest cards in the game from an early perspective. This card is incredible. It will reliably generate 16 value, and it also denies strategies. For example, it can kill things that have passive effects, or in this case, it can lock me out of being able to use AoE buffs. Like, right, I had a melee row of units that I wanted to be able to buff with Thunderbolt Push and Commander's Horn, but I couldn't because it killed them. Imlerith's ability is a little weird. Basically, it's kind of like Chiss Marigold that just damages an enemy, but if the enemy is under frost, it damages them for more. This is one of the very rare scenarios where I'm actually kind of able to get full value out of that extra damage, because usually enemies that are under weather effects are pretty much going to be dying anyway. So it's a pretty strange ability. Okay, so we've got an Alzur's Thunder here. Pretty decent play. And we've also got a line for Decoy on the Wild Hunt Warrior. Decoy will, of course, buff it up. It'll heal it to 5, it'll buff it to 8, and then it'll kill the doo-doo, which buffs it to that 10 thereafter. So, oh, he's actually, he used it on the other one. That's an interesting consideration. So we can use it as a 10-point play on this, or we can use it as a... It would be a 9-point play on this, because it would buff it up to 10, and then I would kill that as well. So, it looks like using it on the Ice Giant is even better. So yeah, we'll just do that. And of course, it heals it, it buffs it with the Decoy buff, and then it reapplies the Ice Giant effect. And of course, that was a little vulnerable to Scorch, but it's not terrible. So we could play the Hound. Unfortunately, the Hound here does give him the decent opportunity to pass. We might be forced to assume he doesn't take it. I mean, we could use Aridin here. Aridin can just pull out something decently valuable, so that we can at least stay ahead of him. And I guess what we would pull out would be a Warrior. That's not terrible value. It's a good point swing. Basically, I just generated 15 points, which is pretty sweet. In addition to that, I put a second body on the board, which is super important for Thunderbolt Potion and Commander's Horn. So, we go into next round, and I still have the uncommitted Wild Hunt Hound, and of course these. These look a little awkward because it doesn't look like I have a lot against the buff, but I will be drawing 3 cards, so it should be fine. Yeah, see, now I've got a lot of buff targets, so it's a lot better. In this matchup, we are not super confident we're going to get value out of Cleaver. We could kick Cleaver now. And of course, the important thing to note is that this isn't the final round, right? We're actually going to kick the Chort instead. They're kind of comparable. This isn't the final round, so I don't feel at risk for kicking things like that. When it is the final round, I might feel like I'm at risk of finding my Biting Frost. If I do find my Biting Frost when I mulligan the card away here, then I'm going to be in a very awkward position, because I will be using Wild Hunt Hound, and it will be a 5 strength dude, and I'll just have the Frost in my hand. Like, it basically just denies me my ability to even draw a card. Using Reaver Scout is kind of an interesting decision on his part. It's a pretty powerful effect. It's kind of telling about the status of his hand, I would say. Well, it is true that I really don't want to Frost. I'm actually just gonna keep this hand. I think this hand is fine. Like, in many hands, I would really like to go for one of these gold cards, but since I have Commander's Horn, the fact that my rally is going to pull out an additional unit could really help me here. So, as always, we will be frosting early here. Normally, you don't necessarily frost or weather so early, because you kind of want them to use their, in the event that they're holding on to a clear weather effect. So, I will be cleavering that, for sure. Might as well do it now.
I'm a dwarf of business.
In the event that they're holding onto a clear weather's effect, you'd like to be able to play the weather a little bit later, so that if they clear it right away, then it at least gains some immediate value since it ticks at the start of their turn. That being said, it's kind of hard with this specific deck to do that. I wouldn't worry about like waiting till later to use weather for this deck. Just wait until they commit to a row, or even better, if you get to familiarize yourself with which rows the different factions' starter decks tend to play on, that's even better. So we've got the rally here. The rally will pull out a Navigator, an Archgriffin, or Chorts. I would really like for it to pull out Chorts. I wouldn't mind an Archgriffin, and Navigator would be really, really terrible. Navigator would be terrible for 2 reasons, those being that it is the weakest dude, and also it's not on the melee row. Archgriffin and Chort are both agile, whereas Navigator is locked to the siege row. And I really want something on the melee row, because I'm going to be buffing that with this Thunderbolt Potion. So he did just use Alzur's Thunder. I'm a little scared that my Hound and my Cleaver are going to die here, but he's... Lacerate. He just used Lacerate. He's down his Philippa and his Lacerate, so I don't think he has the ability to kill off these units. If these 2 get killed off right now, then my Thunderbolt Potion and my Commander's Horn are generating me really, really little value, which really sucks. Right. So I'll just Thunderbolt Potion here. a little bit out of paranoia that he might have had an additional way to kill them that he just didn't use at the time. And of course, my Tort is a very high power, which normally is very vulnerable to Scorch, but he's already played Scorch. You kind of really like it when they play the Scorch so early, because it kind of allows you to freely buff up their dudes. Scorch is a very powerful card, and the presence of it is kind of the most powerful thing. You expect basically everyone to have Scorch, so until they play the Scorch, you have to play very carefully, but you don't have to worry about that once it's played. So we will be playing the Ice Giant here to take it. Okay, so this game is done. And that's the Monsters versus Northern Realms match. The rows are pretty diverse in this deck. Like I said, it's a little harder to predict where they're going to play against that deck specifically. So it's hard to play Frost early, but ultimately the Monsters deck is probably a stronger starter deck, so the matchup should be okay. So that was 3 games with this Monster starter deck. Ultimately performed very well. Like I was mentioning before, the most important thing with this deck is basically to realize what rows your opponent is operating on, right? As you can see, this Monsters deck, it operates mainly on the melee row with a little bit of siege. So if you find yourself in the mirror and you're forced to frost a little early than you like, just consider which rows they operate on. The Nilfgaard starter deck as focuses mostly on the ranged row with a little bit of siege. The Skellige starter deck focuses entirely on melee and siege with basically no ranged. Scoia'tael is mostly melee driven, and there's also Northern Realms, which I said is pretty versatile, and they can basically play on whatever row they want. And that one's a little harder to pin down. Like I said, I would recommend the change from Doo-Doo to Thunderbolt Potion off the bat, just in terms of a starter collection, and the options that you get once you unlock a few cards get a lot better with time. Lastly, I would rank this Monsters starter deck as pretty powerful. I would say it is possibly the second best starter deck. I might put Skellige as number 1. Not entirely sure yet, but it is above the curve in terms of power. It's a pretty good starter deck if you want to start on this. Anyway, I will see you guys next time.